As he was saying, this is a perfect location for a talk about nanomaterials or carbon nanotubes in building materials, because it's a building integrating wood, steel, concrete. And if you think about the future of nanomaterials and about the future of building materials, you can imagine a place like Shanghai, which is the biggest agglomeration in the world, where all the buildings are interconnected and all the buildings are actually interacting with telephones, with cars, with energy, even with the people. And this will be possible only thanks to the role that nanomaterials can play in the building materials industry. However, the building materials industry is also an industry which has a huge impact in sustainability. We are responsible for a good part of the emissions related to the global warming. In combination with other big industries, we emit around 5 to 8% altogether of the emissions in the world. So we believe that carbon nanotubes can help us, on one side, to bring buildings towards the future that we are dreaming about, a future where we think that the building can interact with people, but also towards a future where we believe and we are sure that materials for the building industry will be more sustainable. CRH in particular is a company which is located in the developed countries. Most of the developed countries are our biggest markets. Our biggest markets are in the north of Europe, the USA, Canada, China, and Australia. And it's divided 50 and 50% mainly between Europe and USA, or Americas. We're a company of 90,000 people, around almost 30 billion euros. And we are known by nobody, because we're a holding. So every country, CRH has a different name. All these brands are some of the brands we have in Europe in particular. They are not all, but the important thing of CRH is not the name, is not the brand itself, but is what we produce, and that's building materials. The reason why we believe we are the right partner to introduce nanomaterials at the building level is because we are at every stage of the production of building materials where we can actually have an influence on the building materials itself. So we own quarries, we produce lime, we produce cement, we produce ready-mix, which are those trucks that you see around turning and turning to prevent concrete to become hard because it needs to arrive to the project location ready to be used. And we also have prefabrication. Prefabrication, if you look here around, is the kind of materials that you produce at a factory and then you transport ready to be just mounted, a bit like a Lego piece. This is the area where we want to focus. We have seen that our market is changing, but the market is changing because society is changing. So there is a much higher awareness of natural resources utilization. There is a higher awareness of CO2 emissions. There is a higher awareness on climate change, air quality, water and utilization and management, but also on the human side, there is higher attention and respect of heritage culture or indigenous people. There is a higher attention to the anthropologic dynamics, which have an effect on everything which is around humans. So because people are more aware of this, we need to pay more attention to the way we work. That means that CRH needs to pay attention on the way we produce, the way we deliver, and that's why we have specific targets on CO2. These CO2 targets are linked to the Paris Agreement, which is signed by most of developed countries, and we are setting targets which are ahead of this Paris Agreement, and we are sure that nanomaterials can help us to achieve, at least at the concrete level, some of those targets. We have within CRH a center which is called the Innovation Center for Sustainable Construction, which focuses mainly on 4 goals related to the United Nations. These 4 goals are climate action that we transform into capture carbon utilization. What we try to do is we try to trap CO2 and transform it into a solid to make use it as a building material. We also work actively in the responsible consumption, so that means circular economy. At the same time, we move more into the technology side for sustainable cities, where we interpret it as efficient buildings. So buildings like this, where we can not only improve the energy utilization, but also the interaction with other devices. And finally, digital technologies. In the last 2 points is where we believe carbon nanotubes could have an effect. When you look at the building industry CO2 impact, it comes mainly from the production of cement, so that the carbonation of calcium carbonate that happens in the cement production. And the second biggest CO2 impact comes from the utilization of heating in the building itself. So when a building is done, the efficiency of the insulation allows or reduces the efficiency of the building by providing the right properties on materials level for the heat to stay inside the building. This specific point is very important in the impacts our industry, or actually us as people, have in the environment. Every time we heat up a house or we cool it down when it's summer, we release CO2 into the environment. We want to work particularly in this point, and we expect carbon nanotubes, in particular the carbon nanotubes we have been working with from Oxial, will help us on this point. What we have done here is we have divided 3 groups of goals that we want to achieve with the utilization of carbon nanotubes. We link them also to trends which are affecting our industry. So for instance, the first one is urbanization. We know, and you can see it if you look at the window from this hotel, that buildings are becoming taller and taller, and that brings us to the need of having stronger and lighter materials. If you need stronger, lighter materials, you need also development which goes further the current technologies or the current material science at concrete level. From the energy perspective, the energy efficiency is related to the thermal properties of buildings, and that will bring us also to the need of providing the building with an energy management which is not the one we have today. So we need an insulation improvement with, that goes beyond today's insulation properties. And finally, the water and the emissions related to the utilization of concrete, actually the utilization of cement. If we can produce a material with a much higher strength that can be used for taller buildings, and that can allow the building material to have a much better insulation because the amount of cement is lower, the concrete is lower, and the insulation material is bigger, then we can also reduce the cement utilization. We can reduce the CO2 by consuming less cement. We can reduce the CO2 by consuming also less energy because insulation gets better. And those 3 things together are what we believe to be the first step in the utilization of carbon nanotubes in concrete. As a second step, we believe that thermal conductivity and electrical conductivity can be also introduced at building material level to start interacting with other kind of materials. We foreseen sensors within the concrete material. We foreseen also integrated heating solutions for modular housing with thermally conductive materials made out of concrete and potentially carbon nanotubes. And what we have seen is that, in particular, carbon nanotubes will enhance, and we have seen, and we have done testing, the mechanical properties of concrete, in particular in the bending strength, which is the most difficult to improve. And what we have seen is by improving the mechanical properties, the bending strength of concrete, we can reduce the thickness of what we call the sandwich panels. When I introduced you what were the kind of materials that we produce, I talked about the prefabricated materials. These kind of materials are used to accelerate the construction and to reduce the impact of construction in people's life. So we bring a sandwich panel, which is produced with a layer of concrete, a layer of insulation, and a layer of concrete. And this kind of material provides the architect or the civil engineer with a higher speed of construction. We believe that if we reduce the thickness of this material by the utilization of a much higher concrete with carbon nanotubes, we can improve the insulation properties. As a consequence, we can improve the energy efficiency of buildings and reduce the CO2 impacts of the building industry within the life cycle of a building. But there are, of course, problems right now, or challenges, let's call it different. Those challenges are related mainly to the same things you have been talking about: dispersion, cost, availability, the potential health and safety issues that nanotubes, or in general nanomaterials, could have on humans. So we see this as a first step, at least in the building industry, towards a very successful story with nanomaterials, with carbon nanotubes in particular. But we still need to learn a lot. And what we need to learn is how to use them, so how to improve the dispersion. We need to learn how to measure this improved insulation, because, of course, the building materials are exposed to different environmental conditions in different countries. And if we want to make it a worldwide success, we need to be sure that what we are doing will be applicable, sellable, and scalable to the rest of the countries, not only on the one we are developing. Finally, we need to evaluate, and I think that's very relevant for all of you, what is the exposure effect of people to carbon nanotubes. This is a topic which I believe to be the most important topic and the biggest challenge for the utilization of carbon nanotubes. But I am sure that we will find a way, and I've heard this morning already several companies talking about the potential utilization of carbon nanotubes in solution, reducing the health and safety impact in people. But we believe this to be the next steps for us to be sure that we are using carbon nanotubes properly. So in our industry, it's really a super conservative industry. So we believe that what we need is not really a change in the way we produce, but a change on the mindset of the people working in the industry, accepting that there are several solutions at technical level which can provide our industry with much more sustainable solutions and with different offers that can bring value both for the utilization for the users and for the markets. So that's it. This is what I believe will be the potential impact as a first step in our industry of carbon nanotubes. If you have doubts, questions, comments, just please shoot.
Hello, my name is Hugues Jacquemin from Oxial. Wanted to know a little bit more about the application in concrete. You said that it increases the performance of a concrete. Does it also improve the conductivity? Could you use it to have some prefabricated flooring that is already providing some conductivity or not?
Yes, of course. We foreseen the utilization of, in particular, carbon nanotubes in 3 different steps. The first one is learning to disperse them, evaluating the influence of the dispersion in mechanical properties, because this is quite immediate. But the second step, once we disperse them properly and we achieve a percolation level, we can also increase the thermal and electrical conductivity, providing concrete with properties they don't have today. So if you think about flooring with heating system integrated, or even walls with integrated systems, is the second step. But then the third step, we believe that it can be used also not only for thermal conductivity, but also for electrical or electronic applications, in where the building industry and the automotive industry get integrated for the charging of the vehicles, either on the lanes while you are driving, or on the housing while you are parking your car in the house. So we do believe that carbon nanotubes can have a strong influence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you. Thank you, Diego.